Hello, friends. I'm Emily Carter. I'm 42 years old. I am HIV positive. And this is my true revenge story. You might be wondering why I say revenge. Hold on. I'll explain. I grew up with my mother. She was brave. She left a marriage that hurt her. She wanted better for both of us. Years later, she remarried. We moved into that new life with hope in our pockets. At first, it seemed okay. My stepfather smiled at family dinners. He called me daughter in front of others. He helped with small things. I trusted him. I needed to trust someone. But little cracks start small. A look that lingers too long. A joke that makes me step back. A hand that is a heartbeat too close. I noticed them. My skin crawled. My chest tightened. I tried to push the feelings away. I told myself I was being silly. Then the looks turned into words. Casual comments, meant to be private, said aloud. "You're too young to understand," he would say. And people laughed. My mother covered it with a smile and a hush point one night. I said something. I chose my words carefully, and I chose my mother's voice to trust. "Mom, I don't feel safe," I said. Her eyes dropped. She sighed. She folded the worry away like a dress she was tired of wearing. "Don't make trouble," she told me gently. "Be grateful for what you have." Grateful. It felt like a punishment. I left the room feeling smaller than before. Smaller than any child should feel. I tried other doors. A neighbor I trusted. A close cousin. Each time I opened my mouth, I met the same face. That blank stare. That uncomfortable shift of weight. The whisper, "Keep the house's honor." Their words were shields for their own comfort. Mine became a problem to hide. One evening, something happened that I could not swallow. It wasn't an event I will describe, not here. But it was the moment my childhood ended. It was the moment I learned I could not rely on the people I loved. I ran. I left the house with only a scarf and the sound of my own breath. I went to the police. I thought the badge meant safety. I thought a uniform meant someone who would listen. The first officer I met wore a kind face. He took notes, or so I thought. Then he leaned in too close. He suggested quiet deals instead of a report. He offered help, with strings I would not touch. That is the night I learned something bitter. Sometimes the system that is supposed to protect you is rotten from the inside. I walked out. I felt more alone than ever. My options were shrinking like a shirt after a hot wash. Months passed in a fog. I learned to count my days one breath at a time. I worked. I hid. I smiled when I needed to. I learned the art of small silences. And then the doctor said the word I had been praying never to hear. "You are HIV positive." Sitting in that sterile room, I thought my life had ended. It felt like every door had closed. My body felt like a map of betrayals. For a very long time, I simply existed. I was hollowed out by the news. I let the world think what it wanted about me. But grief changes shape. After the sharpest edge of panic eased, another feeling came. A small, stubborn ember of something that would not die. If I could be erased by lies, if I could be silenced by shame, then I would use the only thing left to me, my voice. Not for petty revenge. Not by hurting others in ways they hurt me. I would use truth. I would make their truths unavoidable. I started small. I kept a notebook. I learned how to save messages. I recorded conversations when I could. I kept receipts, small banknotes, the names people said out loud. I learned who to trust. There are organizations that sit on the side of survivors. There are helpers who know how to navigate laws and newspapers. I found them quietly. I spoke softly over secure lines. Each piece of proof was a thread. I began to weave them together. Slowly. Carefully. Like building a house that could not be pushed down. This is where my story pauses for now. Because the thing about truth is, it takes time to gather. And the thing about revenge that feels like justice is, it has to be patient. It has to be clean. It has to be undeniable. Short pause. Next, I will tell you how I collected every file, every voicemail, every dark secret they thought was private. I will tell you how I found a journalist who would listen. And I will tell you how the first public spark began. But before I go on, I need to say something clear to you right now. If you are listening and you are in the dark, you are not alone. There are people who will stand with you. There are ways to keep yourself safe. Keep your voice. Keep whatever proof you can. And when you are ready, the truth can be louder than shame. After the diagnosis, after the cold, impossible word HIV, I did what hurt the most. I sat very still. I listened. I watched. For a long time, anger felt too big to hold. Grief felt like a heavy coat I could not take off. But underneath it all, a small, stubborn thing began to grow. Not fury for fury's sake. Not revenge for revenge's sake. A clear decision. I would make truth unavoidable. I knew two things for sure. 1, I could not trust the people who had lied for years. 2, I could not fight them alone, at least not publicly, without being crushed. So I started quietly. I learned how to save a voicemail. I learned how to back up messages. I learned which apps keep records and which ones delete. It sounds small, but each little skill was a shield. My phone became evidence. My notebooks became maps. I kept dates, times, names, places. A neighbor dropped by once. He asked if I was okay. I said, I'll be fine. This time I meant it, sort of. Because fine had a new meaning. Fine equals preparing. I reached out to an NGO that helps survivors. I used an anonymous inbox first. I typed slowly. I told them a few plain facts. No drama. No accusations. Just facts. Dates. Names. A request for help. Their reply came the next day. A short message, we can help. We will listen. Are you safe? I wrote back, not yet. But I will be. They sent a list. A lawyer. A counselor. A support worker. A secure phone number to call. They told me simply, we believe survivors. We know how the system can turn. We will not let you be alone. That was the first time anyone said those words to me and actually meant them. Next, I needed proof that would hold up. Words alone were not enough. Not when the other side had money, status, and willing silence. I began small. A recorded call here. A saved message there. A photograph, taken discreetly, when a meeting looked suspicious. A bank transfer screenshot that didn't match the story they told in public. I kept everything in 2 places. One copy on my phone. Another encrypted, in a separate email account I rarely used. I labeled every file. Name. Date. Short description. It took time. It was lonely work. I often cried while typing. And sometimes I had to put the phone down and breathe. While I collected proof, I also started building a safety plan. I changed a routine. I started meeting people in public places. I told the NGO where I would be and when. They helped me get a lock change at home. They helped me arrange a safe meeting space. Then came the hardest part, finding someone who would actually tell the truth. In my town, reporters liked big, sensational stories. But they also liked to be right. I knew a half-truth could become a weapon. So I looked for someone who cared more about facts than headlines. I found a freelance journalist. Her name was Rachel. She had a small but reputable podcast and a track record of careful, confirmed reporting. I reached out, using the NGO's introduction to protect my identity at first. Our first conversation was cautious. She asked questions that were precise and methodical. She didn't coo. She didn't promise miracles. She asked for documents. She asked how I wanted to move forward. I remember thinking, this is the kind of person who can make a quiet thing loud in the right way. Rachel agreed to meet in a cafe in the middle of the day. She had a small recorder and a notepad. She looked at me once, and in that look I saw both the professional and the human. She said, we'll need proof. We'll need corroboration. But if you have that, we can make sure the story cannot be swept under the rug. Her words felt like light through a small window. We set ground rules. No names in public until there was verification. No rushed releases. A legal review before anything went live. And this was crucial, an agreed safety protocol if anyone reacted violently. With Rachel's help and the NGO's support, my files began to form a narrative. Not a sensational script, but a documented, time-stamped trail. A trail that showed patterns. A trail that illustrated what had been denied for years. There were moments I thought I would break. There were nights I left the files open and stared at them until dawn. I worried about being exposed. I worried about my health. I worried about people I could not change. At the same time, I began to notice small changes around me. A neighbor who used to avoid my eyes started to nod when our paths crossed. A cousin who once smiled at my misfortune stopped laughing at certain family jokes. The world was tiny, but it was listening in small ways. And then, late one evening, an unexpected call came. It was a lawyer from the NGO. He had reviewed some of the documents. He said, "There is enough here to open an inquiry. Not everything will end in a courtroom, but there is enough to begin." My hands shook as I listened. Not from fear this time. From the weight of what was about to change. But I also knew this would not be clean. Those who protected predators rarely surrendered gracefully. There would be denials. There would be attempts to discredit me. There would be pressure on Rachel. On the NGO. On my small network of helpers. So I took one more small step. I made a list of what mattered most. Safety first, integrity second, exposure third. I told Rachel the parts one could handle publicly. And we planned for the reveal in stages: slow, deliberate, and legally sound. The stage was set. The threads were woven. The first public spark had to be precise. Next time, I'll tell you about the first small reveal. How a single published piece changed the mood in my town. How the men who thought themselves untouchable first looked at each other and then, slowly, at me. When Rachel and I agreed on the plan, we promised one thing: take it slow. We would not rush emotion. We would not trade truth for headlines. We would be precise. The first public piece was small. Not a full expose. Just a careful, verified story about patterns. A local reporter's column with names redacted at first. A single radio interview that quoted basic facts. A measured, calm presentation of evidence. I remember sitting on a cold bench outside the cafe where Rachel worked. My fingers played with the zipper of my jacket. My heart kept time like a small drum. Rachel sent me the link. She said, "It's live." I clicked. The words on the screen felt like light. Finally, someone had written the truth I had whispered into a notebook for months. The reaction was slow at first. A neighbor muttered to another. A few messages came through my phone, cautious, short. And then, like a tiny crack widening, people began to talk. My stepfather called his brother. There was anger in his voice that I could hear in the recordings Rachel later played to me. "He's trying to ruin me," he said. "He's making a liar of me." But the story was different. It didn't accuse without proof. It showed patterns. It asked questions. And in a town where reputations were everything, questions can be dangerous. My mother's sister stopped visiting the house as often. A cousin who used to bring gossip now avoided family dinners. Small signs. Quiet changes. But they were real. Then the first pushback came. A man at the hardware store spat my name under his breath. An online comment called me a troublemaker. A cousin texted, "Why would you do this? You're ruining everyone." Those messages hurt. They were designed to make me doubt again. To shake me. To make me feel that familiar old smallness. But then something else happened. A woman I barely knew, a woman who had once watched me carry groceries into the house, came to my door. She said, "I heard. I'm sorry I didn't see it before. I have something that might help." She handed me a worn envelope. Inside, a series of notes. Dates. A name I hadn't remembered someone mentioning aloud. That envelope changed everything. It became another thread. And those threads weave into proof. As the small story circulated, a municipal investigator finally called. He said, "We've received complaints. We need to ask a few questions." I felt the room tilt. A step forward. Not everyone reacted the same way. Some men tried to undermine Rachel. They labeled her a sensationalist. They said our facts were out of context. They asked for sources. Rachel replied with documents. And then the worst thing happened. Someone tried to intimidate me. One night, I found a note slid under my door. No words, just a single photo torn from a family album. My name was written on the back in a shaky hand. It was meant to be a threat. A reminder. I slept with the light on that week. But I did not run. Running had not helped me before. Instead, I told the NGO. They arranged for an extra check-in. They arranged a safe house number in case things escalated. The public pressure had an effect. It loosened tongues. People who had been quiet for years started to speak privately to the reporter. A former coworker sent an anonymous message. A neighbor admitted they had heard certain things but thought it wasn't their place. Those private admissions were hard to hear and necessary to collect. They felt like brittle glass at first, sharp and dangerous. Then, with careful handling, they became useful. The men who had power began to shift. Some grew cold. Some tried legal threats. And others, more dangerous, tried to silence the noise with money or bribes. But the ropes we'd built were strong. Rachel had legal counsel. The NGO had advocates. My files were organized and time-stamped. There was a moment late when the town was mostly asleep when I read all the documents again. I held the stack and felt something close to peace. Not because I wanted revenge, but because finally there was a path forward. The first reveal had done what I hoped. It made the comfortable nervous. It made the cover thing shift. I also learned something unexpected. My HIV diagnosis, the thing I had thought would be the end, became part of the conversation for the right reasons. Rachel made space to discuss stigma. She wrote about survivors, health access, and how shame keeps victims quiet. The narrative was changing from gossip to a public health and rights issue. By the end of that week, two small but important things had happened. An inquiry office opened a file on my stepfather, and the officer who had tried to coerce me was placed on administrative leave pending review. It was not a courtroom conviction. It was not instant justice. But it was movement. It was recognition. It was the first time the system was pushed toward accountability. And inside me, something shifted. The tiny ember had become a steady flame. Next, we would plan a larger exposure. Not to humiliate for the sake of humiliation, but to ensure the facts were undeniable, to protect other people who might have been harmed. There would be legal filings. There would be public testimony. And there would be danger. But I was ready. When the small article went viral, things changed faster than I ever imagined. What started as whispers had turned into headlines. My stepfather's perfect mask began to crack. I remember the morning it all exploded. I woke up to the sound of my phone, hundreds of messages, calls, unknown numbers. Rachel's voice trembled over the line. She said, "Emily, it's everywhere." They picked it up. The networks are talking about it. I opened my laptop. And there it was, my story, our story, playing on every major channel. The headline read, "Local woman exposes years of abuse and corruption. A town's hidden secret finally comes to light." For the first time, my truth wasn't silent anymore. It was loud. It was undeniable. But with attention came the darkness. Some people applauded me. Some called me brave. Others sent threats, hatred, disgust. One comment said, "HIV women like you shouldn't even be alive." Another wrote, "You deserved it." Those words cut deep. But I had already survived worse. I had already faced monsters without masks. So this was nothing compared to the past. Rachel called again that evening. "We have a chance," she said. "A documentary team wants to cover your full story. They'll investigate, fact-check, and show the system that failed you." For a moment, I froze. Because it meant showing my face, my name, my diagnosis, my scars. But then I thought of every girl who had been told to stay quiet. Every survivor who hid behind silence. And I said, yes, let's do it. The next few weeks were a blur of interviews and long nights. Camera lights. Recorders clicking. Coffee cups gone cold. Sometimes I'd sit in front of the lens, my hands shaking, trying to hold my voice steady. But every time I wanted to stop, I remembered that 16-year-old version of me, crying in the dark. And I spoke louder. The crew filmed in my old house. They captured the small bedroom where everything began. The same broken mirror. The same window I used to stare out of, hoping for help. When the documentary finally aired, it was like watching my past burn and heal at the same time. Millions watched it. Thousands shared it. And justice finally began to move. Within days, my stepfather was arrested. The corrupt officer was suspended without pay. 2 other men were summoned for questioning. And the NGO received hundreds of messages from women saying, "I believe her, because I've lived the same pain." The world that had once shamed me now stood behind me. And for the first time in years, I slept without fear. But revenge, it wasn't just about punishment anymore. It was about peace. It was about truth. Because my story wasn't mine alone, it was a mirror to every hidden story out there. A few weeks later, Rachel and I attended a public forum. People came forward, survivors, doctors, activists. They thanked me. One little girl hugged me and said, "You're not broken, you're brave." I cried that day. Not because of pain, but because I finally understood what healing meant. I didn't infect anyone with my anger. I infected the system with truth. And it spread faster than any virus ever could. Today, I still live with HIV. But it no longer defines me. It reminds me that I survived. That I turned something deadly into something powerful. Justice doesn't erase scars, but it teaches you to wear them like armor. After that hospital visit, after hearing those 3 words, "You're HIV positive," something inside me snapped. Not in anger, but in clarity. For the first time in years, my mind was quiet. Because I finally knew what I had to do. I didn't want to die a victim. I wanted to die with peace, knowing that the truth didn't die with me. So I began planning. Quietly. Carefully. I stopped crying and started watching every single person who had hurt me. My stepfather. The police officer. That fake friend who spread lies about me. They thought I was gone, broken, destroyed. But I was right there, watching, remembering, recording. I started saving evidence, old messages, voice notes, call logs. Every innocent text that hid their guilt, every late-night message that proved what they'd done. At first, it hurt, reliving those moments again. But pain became fuel. Because I knew someday, these same memories would destroy them. Then, one evening, I walked into a small cafe downtown. There, waiting for me, was Sarah Miller, a journalist from a women's rights organization. She had heard whispers about what happened to me. And when I told her everything, she didn't look away. For the first time, someone believed me. No pity. No judgment. Just truth. Sarah told me, "Emily, if we're going to do this, we need proof. Undeniable, unshakable proof." And I smiled. Because that's exactly what I'd been collecting. From that day on, we became a team. I wasn't alone anymore. Every night, I'd send her files, documents, photos, and she'd archive them safely. We worked in silence, in shadows, knowing one wrong move could destroy everything. I stopped seeing myself as a victim. I started seeing myself as the storm that was about to change everything. And when all the pieces were ready, when the truth was strong enough to burn through every lie, I knew what had to come next. Justice. Real, undeniable justice. But for me, time didn't heal anything. It just sharpened the pain until it turned into purpose. Months had passed since I started collecting evidence with Sarah. We had everything: proof, files, statements. But I didn't want the world to just read my story. I wanted them to feel it. To see the faces of the men who wore masks of respect while hiding monsters underneath. So I came up with a plan. A simple plan. Let them dig their own graves. I created a new social media account. No one knew it was me. I changed my name, my look, my voice. To them, I was just another young woman looking for help or opportunities. And one by one, they walked right into my messages. Those same men who had once ruined my life. My stepfather was the first. He didn't even recognize me when I texted him. All it took was a few polite words, and he was back to being the same disgusting man he'd always been. Every chat, every call, I recorded it all. Proof that his monster never changed. Next came the police officer. The one who once said, "Help me first, then I'll help you." I reached out, pretending to be scared, pretending to need his protection. He replied with the same poison. "Meet me tonight, we'll talk privately." Perfect. Another piece of evidence. Another nail in his coffin. Sarah and I compiled everything: their words, their actions, their crimes. And sent it all to a trusted lawyer who worked with abuse survivors. The walls were closing in, and they didn't even know it yet. But I didn't stop there. Because revenge isn't just about justice, it's about timing. You have to let them feel safe, confident, powerful, right before you take everything away. So I waited. Watched them laugh on social media, live their lives like nothing had happened. My stepfather had joined a local charity, pretending to be a family man. The police officer? Promoted. Smiling in a photo, shaking hands with politicians. I stared at those pictures and whispered to myself, smile now, because soon, the world will see who you really are. That night, I couldn't sleep. Not because I was scared, but because I knew what was coming next. Tomorrow, the storm would finally begin. You know, revenge isn't about screaming or breaking things. It's about silence, the kind that makes the guilty restless. The kind that destroys them without you ever lifting a hand. That morning, I woke up early. The sky outside was gray, heavy with clouds. Like even nature knew something was about to break. Sarah had been up all night, editing the documentary we had spent months building. She looked at me and said, "Are you ready for this, Emily?" And I smiled, a tired smile. "More than ever," I said. At exactly 10 a.m., we clicked upload. The video went live. It started with my voice. Not my name, not my face. Just my voice, raw, trembling, real. I told my story from the beginning, the abuse, the silence, the betrayal. And then, one by one, their faces appeared on screen. My stepfather, the police officer, the so-called friends. Their photos, their messages, their recorded calls. Everything. Within minutes, the video started spreading. First locally, then across the whole state, then the entire country. I sat in Sarah's tiny apartment, watching the numbers rise. 10,000 views. 50,000. 200,000. And then 1 million. My phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Reporters were calling. NGOs, journalists, women I'd never met, all thanking me for speaking out. But the best part? Seeing the panic spread. The same people who once made me feel helpless were now hiding, deleting accounts, turning off their phones, and running from the cameras that once loved them. By evening, news channels were flashing their names. Local officer suspended in assault scandal. Respected businessman accused of abuse by stepdaughter. The world was finally seeing the truth. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel invisible. I felt alive. Sarah hugged me, tears in her eyes. "You did it, Emily. You actually did it." But I wasn't smiling, because I knew something. Justice isn't the end. It's just the beginning. That night, I went live on social media. This time with my real name. My real face. No more hiding. "Hi, I'm Emily Carter," I said. "And yes, I'm HIV positive. But that doesn't make me weak. It makes me a survivor, stronger than any man who ever tried to silence me." The comments section exploded. Thousands of people, men and women, sending love, support, and courage. For once, I wasn't just the girl who was broken. I was the woman who fought back. And I promised them one thing. This isn't just my fight anymore. This is for every woman who's been told to stay quiet. Because silence protects monsters. And I'm done protecting them. You know, when the world finally saw my truth, I thought I'd feel nothing but peace. But peace doesn't come that easy. Even when justice is served, the scars don't just vanish. After the video went viral, everything around me changed. The men who once ruled over me were now the headlines of every newspaper. My stepfather was arrested. The officer who abused his badge suspended. And the rest? They were too busy running from the shadows of their own guilt. But me? I was left sitting in a quiet apartment, staring at the same four walls. Wondering, what now? For years, revenge was all I lived for. It was my heartbeat, my reason to keep breathing. But now that it was over, I felt empty. That's when Sarah walked in with a letter. It was from a woman, a survivor, who had watched my story online. She wrote, "Emily, your story saved my life. I was going through the same nightmare, but after watching you, I found the courage to leave." I read that letter over and over again. And for the first time since my mom's death, I cried. Not out of pain, but out of purpose. That night, I made a new promise to myself. I would use the time I had left not for hate, but for hope. So, I joined Sarah's NGO full-time. We started a campaign for women's justice, helping those who were too scared to speak. We built safe houses, created online helplines, and began training volunteers to stand by victims, not blame them. Every time I sat across from a woman whose eyes carried the same fear mine once did, I told her, "You're not broken. You're brave." And somehow, each story I heard healed a piece of me. It's funny, isn't it? The same world that tried to silence me was now listening. The same voice they ignored was now giving others a reason to fight. People often ask me, "Emily, do you regret not taking revenge in a harsher way?" And I always smile. Because real revenge isn't about destroying others. It's about rebuilding yourself so beautifully that even your scars look like strength. I'm still HIV positive. I still live with it every day. But I'm not dying from it anymore. I'm living through it. And before my time comes, I'll make sure no woman ever feels as helpless as I once did. Because justice isn't a moment, it's a movement. After my story went viral, something incredible happened. Women, not just from my city, not just from my country, but from all over the world, started writing to me. Some were scared teenagers. Some were mothers trapped in abusive marriages. And some were women who had already given up hope. They called me their voice. But honestly, they became mine. One evening, I walked into our NGO office and saw a group of volunteers hanging a new banner on the wall. It said, "The Emily Carter Foundation for Women Who Refuse to Stay Silent." I stood there, completely speechless. For years, my name had been a symbol of shame, whispered behind my back. But now, it stood for courage. We started working harder, providing shelter, therapy, and education for survivors. Every woman we helped became part of something bigger, a network of strength. And one by one, they began sharing their own stories. Soon, the movement took on a life of its own. Reporters came, TV interviews, public speeches. And every time someone asked, "Emily, what made you do all this?" I'd smile and say, "I was broken once, but pain is just another word for power if you know how to use it." Over time, the foundation grew. It reached schools, colleges, and even government programs. I started speaking publicly about HIV awareness, about how disease doesn't define you, silence does. One of my proudest days was when a young girl hugged me after an event and said, "Because of you, I told my mom what's happening to me, and she believed me." That moment felt bigger than any revenge, because I realized I didn't just punish my abusers. I rewrote the story for millions of women who thought they had no voice. And maybe that's what real victory looks like. Not in courtrooms, not in prisons, but in the hearts that start beating stronger because of you. Now, every time I look in the mirror, I see a woman who was once afraid to even breathe freely, but now breathes for hundreds who couldn't. So, if you're listening to this, if you've ever felt small, weak, or unheard, remember this. The world doesn't decide your worth. You do. And sometimes, your story becomes the spark that lights 1,000 souls. I'm sitting by my window right now, watching the evening sky fade into shades of gold and purple. It's strange, I used to fear sunsets, because they reminded me that another day was ending, and I was still broken. But today, I find peace in them. Because I know that even the sun has to fall, only to rise again tomorrow. You know, people often ask me, "Emily, do you forgive them?" The ones who hurt me, the ones who made me bleed, lie, cry, and nearly give up? And every time, I take a deep breath and say, "Yes, I forgive them." But I will never forget what they taught me. Because forgiveness isn't about letting them go free. It's about freeing yourself. If I had chosen anger, my story would have ended in darkness. But I chose truth, and truth gave me wings. I remember the girl I used to be. Trembling, scared, begging for help that never came. She died a long time ago. But in her place, a woman was born who refused to stay silent ever again. And that woman, she changed lives. When I look at the women who come to my foundation now, I see hope in their eyes. Hope that maybe, just maybe, one voice can change everything. And that's what I want to leave behind, not my name, not my fame, but a movement. A spark that keeps burning long after I'm gone. Because even if my body fails, my words won't. Even if my heart stops beating, my story will still breathe in every woman who refuses to give up. Months after my passing, something incredible happened. The video documentary that exposed every man who hurt me went viral again. But this time, it wasn't just about my pain. It was about courage. Women from across the country started writing, sharing, standing up, saying, "If Emily could speak, so can I." Soon, journalists, lawyers, activists, and even students began to join hands. They built something beautiful. The Emily Carter Foundation. A home for every woman who is silenced. A place where truth is louder than shame. Every week, new survivors walked through those doors. Some trembling, some crying. But all carrying the same fire I once carried. The fire to rise again. And there, on a white wall in the center of the hall, they painted my favorite quote in big, bold letters. Real revenge isn't about hurting others. It's about reclaiming your power. Every woman who enters reads those words and smiles because she knows she's no longer alone. They say I'm gone, but I know better. I live in every story they tell, in every truth they dare to speak, in every heart that refuses to stay silent. So if you ever feel broken, remember my story. Remember that pain can build purpose, that even the darkest nights can create the brightest dawns. And when the world tries to bury your truth, stand tall and let your scars speak louder than your silence. Because justice may take time, but when it arrives, it speaks with a voice that never dies. My name was Emily Carter, and even in death, I am still alive.